How's it going, folks? This is Mike, and I'm back to do another name tag video. If you hear any noise in the background, if it's hard to hear my voice, it's because I have a fan blowing right on my back. We're in the middle of a terrific heat wave here in the unwashed Midwest, and since I'm too cheap to turn on the air conditioning, I've been sweating a lot, so I may have to turn it on tonight. It's getting a little bit silly. Okay, so name tag video, which we did, well, some of us did about a week and a half ago, which we just took our first names, not our YouTube names, but our first names, and talked about a film for each letter of the name, right? So it's a lot of fun. And one of my YouTube friends, a guy named Rob, whose channel is called Rob's Movie Collection, he came up with the idea of doing a name tag video for a different genre of films, okay? Instead of a variety of films, one genre. And on his first video, I think, my memory is so bad, I think he did all science fiction. Correct me if I'm wrong, Rob. I think that's what he did. And he did one a couple of days ago. This is for action and adventure, okay, which is a good idea. So I'm going to put a link to his video below so you can take a look at it. And you really need to check out Rob's work because he's just starting out on YouTube, but he does some really creative stuff. He has good use of still photography for each one of the films that he's talking about, a variety of stills. He has a great voice. It's like a radio voice, you know. So you really should check out what he's doing. He's a good YouTuber, and he needs a little bit of support. Needs some people to sub to his channel and push him on. Okay. So anyway, for those of you who know me on YouTube, you know that action and adventure is not necessarily the genre that I concentrate on collecting. So I had a hard time finding one for each letter. In fact, my last letter, the letter L, Michael, I couldn't find one. So I came up with 6 films. The first, for letter M, here's a classic for you, The Mark of Zorro from 1940, 20th Century Fox, directed by, who is it directed by? Ruben Mamelian. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. Tyrone Power, Linda Darnell, Basil Rathbone, and Gail Sondergaard in this classic story of Zorro. And this is a very, very cool movie. I'll read you the plot here. These guys can do it a lot better than I can. So Tyrone Power stars as 19th century nobleman Don Diego de Vega, whose father, the mayor of Los Angeles, is removed from office by the sinister Captain Pasquale, played by Basil Rathbone. Boo, hiss. And by day, the crooked politicians rob the citizenry at every turn, and at night, Don Diego, wearing a mask, defies their laws and avenges the innocents. As he leaves his trademark, the letter Z, wherever he goes, he also leaves an impression on the mayor's niece, Linda Darnell, who can't help but love him in disguise. Oh, love the hero in disguise. This is a cool movie. Now, Tyrone Power was a great star in the 1930s and 1940s. He was every bit as much kind of like the male equivalent to a glamour girl. You know, he was a male pinup, but he was also a very good actor and a very good hero in films like this. So when they invented the word swashbuckle, this is what they were talking about. So great sword action between Tyrone Power and Basil Rathbone. Mark of Zorro. Okay. For the letter I, this is a fairly recent film called The Interpreter, starring Sean Penn and Nicole Kidman, directed by Sidney Pollack. And it's about Nicole Kidman plays a United Nations interpreter who accidentally overhears what seems to be a plan for an assassination. And so, let's see, I'll read the plot here. Academy Award winners Nicole Kidman and Sean Penn star in this action-packed thriller, The Interpreter. And this woman, translator Sylvia Broom, played by Kidman, overhears a potentially explosive secret about a planned assassination attempt. But when federal agent Tobin Keller, played by Sean Penn, investigates her claim and digs deeper into her dangerous past, he begins to question whether she is a victim or a suspect. Okay, it is one of the best thrillers I've ever seen. I think you would really like this. Lots of extra features. Has an alternate ending, deleted scenes. Has Sidney Pollack at work from concept to cutting room. A day in the life of real interpreters. Well, that's kind of interesting. Okay. the interpreter. For letter C, here's a movie I've talked about many times before, as well as other people have done the same thing. This is Cape Fear, truly one of the best thrillers ever made. 1962, Gregory Peck, Robert Mitchum, Polly Bergen, Laurie Martin, Martin Balsam, Barry Chase, Telly Savalas. This is about Robert Mitchum plays a guy named Max Cady, who is an ex-con, right? Who has managed to get out of jail, and he goes back to the southern town where Gregory Peck, who was the lawyer who managed to get him put away, is living and practicing. And he decides to terrorize Gregory Peck, his wife, and his daughter to get revenge for putting him in jail. And this is absolutely one of the best performances by Robert Mitchum that you will ever see. He is so scary in this. And there's an interview with Polly Bergen, who plays Gregory Peck's beautiful wife. I can't remember now if it's on an A&E biography or if it's on the making of documentary on this disc, because I haven't watched this for a while. But she was talking about what it was like to do the scenes with Robert Mitchum where he's threatening her. I mean, he's just really roughing her up. And she said that she was absolutely terrified because he made it so real. She didn't feel that he was acting. He was very rough with her physically, and emotionally he just really scared her to death. So Robert Mitchum has never been better than in Cape Fear. Okay. Going on to letter H. Here's a movie I talked about fairly recently in another video. This is A History of Violence, starring, let's see, who is it? Viggo Mortensen, also has Maria Bello. I think that's who plays his wife. My memory is so bad. Maria Bello, William Hurt, Ed Harris, directed by David Cronenberg, who has to put in as many bone-crushing scenes of violence as he can possibly put in here. But it's fairly restrained. It's not as violent as it could be. But great performance by Viggo Mortensen as a guy living in a small town, running a restaurant, has a wife and a son, and he's living a perfectly peaceful life. And then it's found out that he has a former life as a member of a gang of criminals, organized crime back in the East. And it all comes back to haunt him, so it gets very crazy. Fantastic performance by not only Viggo Mortensen in the lead role, but also by William Hurt, and one of my favorite supporting actors, Ed Harris. Okay. Next up for letter A, here's another classic from 1938. This is Angels with Dirty Faces. Okay, Angels with Dirty Faces, directed by Michael Curtiz, filmed at Warner Brothers. Great cast of actors. This is James Cagney, Pat O'Brien, Humphrey Bogart, Ann Sheridan, and who else? I left somebody out. I guess I did. George Bancroft. Yeah, Pat O'Brien. Right. Oh, and the Dead End Kids. The Dead End Kids, a group of young teenage actors who, for a while, made films called under the name Dead End Kids. Later on, they became the East Side Kids, and eventually they wound up being the Bowery Boys. So they made something like 81 movies and a couple of serials during their very long career. This is a great movie about, takes place back in the 1930s, starts out in the 1920s, when these two young boys, played by, well, they grow up to be James Cagney and Pat O'Brien, but one of them is called Rocky Sullivan, the other guy's name is Jerry Connolly, and they live in the same neighborhood. And they're always getting in trouble. Well, Jerry Connolly goes on to become a priest, so he's done okay for himself. Rocky Sullivan has started out as being in a detention home for juvenile delinquents and gone on to more and more crime and end up spending a lot of years in jail. When he gets out of jail, he comes back to the old neighborhood, and he and Jerry, or Father Jerry, they reconcile and all this sort of thing. They've always been friends. And so it turns out that Rocky has not learned his lesson. He's still wanting to make big money and get involved in crime. And there are a bunch of young kids in the neighborhood, played by the Dead End Kids, who are also sort of carbon copies of what Rocky was and what Jerry Connolly was also when they were both young kids. Although Rocky screwed up his life, Jerry Connolly did not. And Father Jerry is trying to save these kids from making the same mistakes that Rocky did when he was young. And unfortunately, when these kids meet Rocky, they start to hero worship him, and they want to emulate him as much as possible. So it's sort of like good versus evil. Great performance by James Cagney. Pat O'Brien is also very good, and so is Bogart, and so is Ann Sheridan. But the fantastic performance in this film is by James Cagney as the very flawed and also very sensitive kid who went wrong. Okay, definitely worth seeing. Classic film. And finally, for letter E, since I'm leaving off letter L, this will be the last one. I found this movie by Clint Eastwood called The Iger Sanction. It's in this terrific box set, the American Icon Collection, Clint Eastwood, 4 films. It has Play Misty for Me, The Iger Sanction, Coogan's Bluff, and The Beguiled. And I picked The Iger Sanction for letter E, and I watched it just last night. I'd never seen it before. Fantastic movie, directed by Clint Eastwood as well. He plays a guy who used to be, so what is his name in the film? John Hemlock, who is an art teacher and also an art collector. He's trying to live a peaceful life, but he also has a past life as a hired killer for the American government. And the killings that he used to do, they were called sanctions. And he's being pulled back into it because one of his close friends has been assassinated, and he accepts the job to go find out who it was who killed this guy. So it all takes place. Most of it takes place in Switzerland among mountain climbers. Turns out that the plot is kind of crazy, but it turns out that one of the assassins is a famous mountain climber, and he's supposed to climb the mountain, which is Mount Eiger in Switzerland, to find out if he can figure out which one. It's crazy. But what's cool about it is the location photography and the fact that Clint Eastwood is very much involved doing a lot of his own stunts, and George Kennedy is his co-star. Vonetta McGee is the very sexy love interest who is also involved as a spy, and it gets really crazy. Jack Cassidy is also in it, playing a very interesting kind of a supporting role. And I was surprised. I really enjoyed this film. There isn't that much violence as I would have expected in a Clint Eastwood thriller, but it does have a lot of great action. So highly recommend it. And that's my video for name tag action adventure. If anybody would like to play along and join in on this with Rob and me, please do. It's just for fun, and it gives us all a chance to keep talking about films that we like. So, all right. So thanks for watching. Comments are welcome.